Fernando here from Panteao. Let's talk ballistics. Let's talk ammo. Let's start with the bullet itself. Everyone is always wrapped around the axle over which type of hollow point. Should I use fragmentary ammunition? Should I use ball? Let's talk about the projectile itself, specifically to handgun ammunition, handgun calibers. We don't want to talk about rifle. We don't want to talk about shotgun. We don't want to talk about armored personnel carriers and what you should use against them. We're talking about strictly concealed carry and self-defense. So let's step away from ball ammunition from now. Again, ball ammunition, ball round, a full metal jacket projectile. Great for practice, does not expand. The diameter by which it's going to impact with is going to be the diameter by which it stays. So that is a great round to use to practice on the range, but not what I would recommend for concealed carry. Let's look at hollow points. Hollow point projectile. Hollow point projectile is typically consisting of a jacket or a plated jacket and the core lead. Now that lead could be pure lead. It could have a hardening agent like antimony. It could have 1.5% antimony. It could have 2, it could have 3% antimony to make that lead harder. Typically the designers of these bullets are trying to figure out what velocity that bullet's going to be driven to, and they want the bullet to expand in a controlled manner, and that controlled manner is going to be important for the depth of penetration, so they determine whether they want pure lead or some type of hardener with that lead. Shape of the cavity is important. Is it a conical cavity? Does it have a very shallow opening? Is it like a little, looks like an ice cream scoop went inside the ice cream and just took out a little bit of that to create a small cavity? The cavity depth is critical for the design, but it is also just one element of that particular bullet design. So you have your jacket, you have your core, you have the cavity in that core, and then you have the velocity by which that bullet is driven. Now, we can get into the semantics of the thickness of the jacket, the skives on the jacket. Is there anything done to the core as far as how the core is pre-cut? Some projectiles have a core that's pre-stressed, and that way on an expansion it's going to open in a certain pattern, almost like a petals of a flower. Some jackets have a heavier jacket towards the front versus towards the rear, so that way when it expands, the jacket has a certain profile. When all is said and done, we're talking about a bullet expanding. Let's just put that out there. Regardless of how it's constructed or the method by which they make it, we want the bullet to expand. Why do we want a bullet to expand? We want to be able to make that projectile cause the greatest amount of damage possible. That damage is within the body of that adversary. We don't want the projectile going through that adversary and hitting grandma down the street who's going to sue you later. We really want it to cause the most amount of damage inside that bad guy. And by having that bullet expand, it's going to cause greater damage and impact a greater amount of organs. So that's the very basic part of it. And I know I'm dumbing it down, but we really need to address the very basic elements of what goes into a bullet and why a bullet is doing what it's doing before we get into the obstacles it's going to encounter. So the key thing is going to be in our continuing discussion here is how that bullet design, coupled with the velocity it's driven to, is going to perform in a medium like gelatin. 10% ordnance gelatin is what we all use. 10% ordnance gelatin is the equivalent of semi-tense muscle tissue. So we'll get into the details of that shortly. But we want to be able to see why a bullet does what it does and why that particular projectile is good for you. So we're going to get into some more details shortly.